We parents have a lot of things. One thing we maybe don't have is time for video games. And the MMORPG genre famously requires a lot of it. As such, many parents, myself included, pretty much has written off the entire genre. Once I got kids, MMOs pretty much were off the table. But there is one that I've never really managed to shake off. As a teenager, I played probably about 3,000 hours of Guild Wars 1. When the sequel was released in 2012, I jumped in with great anticipation. And I really liked it. It's just life and other video games got in the way, and I kind of stopped playing after those first something like 50 initial hours. When the expansion End of Dragons was announced last year, I figured maybe it's time to get back. And when it was finally released earlier this year in February, I jumped in. And since then, I've been playing a few hours here and there with the occasional binge. Now, I've finally finished that main storyline that I started a decade ago. I moved on to the Living Story chapters and the expansion, and I'm just about to start the second one. And I think it's kind of time for me to sit down and talk about this game, because it's one of those that doesn't get nearly as much attention as I think it should. The game is beautifully crafted with some really well thought out designs that honestly deserves a bigger light shown upon them. But is it an MMO that actually works for a parent? Hi, I'm Dad Plays Games, and in this video, I'm going on an adventure.
Oi, traveler, please come here, listen. I'm a local trader and I bring my caravan through here once or twice each moon. Lately, it's been getting worse with bandit raids in the area, and now my caravan is late. I fear for the worst. I sent my son out with it this time and hired some extra thugs to keep him safe, but I worry maybe that wasn't enough. Please, go out there, kill some bandits, and bring me 10 trophies as proof of your deed. I shall reward you handsomely. By the way, not all of them have trophies, so, yeah, good luck.
Familiar, right? Most RPGs, especially MMORPGs, are filled with this kind of quest. They try to attract you to the task at hand with some world-building lore and dialogue, only to pull out the rug from under you when it's time to actually do the deed. It's honestly so standard that some RPGs even joke about the whole concept, some of them also while doing it themselves. Nowadays, obviously, quests are a bit more involved than kill X or fetch Y, but it's still very much a routine of following a marker, finding a quest giver, following the instructions with various amount of guidance, and then usually going back for your reward unless the reward is given to you right then and there. It might be covered in plot, dialogue, or encounters, but if you leave to explore something for a few hours and then come back, nothing's probably changed. No matter how urgent they made it seem in the first place. They are static, if you will. They require player input to move forward. Some might have a timer that you need to complete it within or you fail, but most of the time you can just leave and come back whenever you want. And I get it. Because you don't want to spend hours working on a single quest. Spend time building the level, the world around it, writing dialogue, recording voice lines, making art assets, create animations for something that a lot of people might actually never even see. And because all of these things cost money and development time. So instead, you make sure that it's there for everyone to experience if they want to, no matter when in the game they decide to get to it. I get it, I really do. And if I could make video games, I probably would do the same, to be honest. But in doing so, the world starts to feel a bit stale, a bit dead. It starts feeling less alive. There's no longer a living, breathing world around you. So many games spend hours upon hours on developing advanced AI systems and routines so that the world should feel more alive. They talk about it in the marketing, and yet when you get to it, it ends up feeling more like smoke and mirrors. Because characters moving around the streets or living their daily lives, they make the world look alive. They don't really make the world feel alive. For that, you kind of need to make sure that the world seems to continue to function around you, even when you as a player isn't actually there. Now, Guild Wars 2 does this amazingly well, and it's an almost 10-year-old MMORPG. Sure, it may not have the advanced routines and AI that a modern game has like Cyberpunk or Skyrim, so the world maybe doesn't look as alive as those games, but it feels more alive. Because Guild Wars 2 set out from the get-go to make a game without quest givers and quest markers. A game that passively promotes cooperation with others. So for this reason, they decided to go with two alternatives to standard quests. There are still the many standard NPCs around the world, needing help with stuff. They are marked on the map with a heart, so you can find them easily. But when you approach the area, a part of the UI in the top corner pops up with an explanation on what they want help with. You can start helping them right away. You don't need to go find anyone or talk with anyone. And there is always several ways to help, so you can choose whatever fits your playstyle or mood at the time. When you've helped out enough, the meter is full and a reward is sent to you by mail. And with that, a nice little thank you note from the NPC. That NPC will now also be a merchant of some sort, so you have somewhere to offload all that loot you found. Now, of course, you can go up and talk to the actual NPC throughout the process in various stages to either get some sugarcoating on what to do or some more information about what's happening in the area. It's still pretty much standard quest things, but a bit more dynamic. But the big one, however, speaking of dynamic, is the dynamic events. They are essentially big quests that have different triggers. They have a win state and a fail state, and those states may then in turn be triggers for other events or some other things happening, like a merchant opening up or an area being blocked off by difficult enemies. And yes, these events repeat, but there's usually some sort of cooldown before they can repeat. Now, the triggers can be anything from a timer to a player talking to an NPC somewhere on the map, the outcome of another event, or some sort of combination between them. And this means that even if there isn't a player nearby, an event can start and trigger on its own, even if there's no one there. Players in the area will be notified that there's an event going on nearby, and then they can choose if they want to go there and participate or not. And if they do decide to participate, they are rewarded when the event ends, depending on how much they actually helped out, even if the event failed. Let me give you an example from an early region called Queensdale. In the eastern parts of Queensdale, there is a monastery. A hidden timer in the background will reach the end and trigger the monk brother Matthias to tell his colleagues to start loading the carts with kegs of ale. Suddenly, a band of centaurs will attack and try to steal the kegs. It's now up to the players in the area to try and stop them. If they fail, a new event is triggered, where you have to reclaim kegs of ale from centaurs around the area and return them to Brother Matthias. After at least 5 kegs are returned, the event is successful and will trigger a third event. If the centaurs were successfully beaten in the first event, or the kegs returned on the second state after failing the first, another event occurs to protect the shipment of ale to a nearby outpost, and that will start after a brief dialogue. Obviously, the cart is attacked several times on the way, and if the attacks aren't successfully driven away by the players, the shipment is destroyed. The timer to trigger the first event in the chain begins again. Now, if it actually does make it to the destination, one of the NPCs will be available as a merchant for the players for a short while, before walking back to the monastery and restarting the timer to trigger the first event again. Now, from the looks of it, this is neither very complex or special, but it feels so much more alive than a normal quest would. Most players will pass by this event at one point or another, take part in it, have fun with it, and then be on their merry way with another adventure. And the world will appear to continue moving in the background, even if they didn't choose to engage with it at all, building on that feeling of a living, breathing world. Now, obviously some players will probably stay around and wait for this to repeat, breaking the illusion a little bit. But if you were to make a single-player game with triggering event chains like this, just pausing it while the player is in the area is not that hard to do. Obviously, for an MMORPG like Guild Wars 2, where there's players in the area constantly, you can't really do that. But to me, they are a natural step up from the standard quests of old. Personally, when hearing someone describe the urgency of a task, and then allowing me to get sidetracked for hours upon hours doing something completely different, and then when I finally get back, let me continue the quest as if I hadn't left at all, that just makes, for me, quests into a checkbox of tasks to do, and takes the fun out of it. It breaks the illusion, and I'm honestly not a fan of it anymore. But hearing an urgent task be described to me, and then seeing it actually happen, and if I don't participate in it, it will fail and lead to something else, that means that story of the world is written even if I'm participating or not. The world stays alive, and the illusion remains intact. Now, of course, there are downsides to this approach as well. Not only do they require a bunch of extra work to make sure that a region of the game doesn't feel empty, just because the events hasn't triggered yet. I think I remember hearing a talk from the developers from before the game shipped, where they said they had made about 10 times as many quests as they had in the original Guild Wars. There's also obviously the risk of a lot of people never seeing these events in the first place. They'll miss them when they were there and then go around to some other place and never see them again. But honestly, if they accept the quest and then leave, only to come back years later even, kind of defeats the point, doesn't it? And at the core, a lot of these dynamic events in Guild Wars 2 are pretty basic and simple things we've seen before, like escort a caravan, for example. But the dynamic nature of them do make them feel much more alive. Again, it's not a perfect solution. If the event chain happens to trigger by chance every time you happen to walk by, it breaks the illusion very quickly. It will be very obvious that it's just repeating. However, I think and hope that new technologies in the field are likely to make this a lot better. For example, I know that Cloud Imperium Games, the developers of Star Citizen, are working on a simulated economy system that will trigger dynamic events based on things happening in this simulated economy. A system like that, essentially simulating a whole game world, or in this case a game universe, on a massive cloud server somewhere, and then streaming event triggers back to the players, means that things can get a lot more interesting. So I, for one, hope to see how that evolves in the future. But in the end, I guess you could say that the best quest is no quest? So, the dynamic events make things feel alive. Cool. But how does it look? Now, graphically, the game does at times show its age, but considering the fact that it's older than my kids are, I think we can forgive it for that. But thanks to incredible art design, style, and level design, the game holds up surprisingly well. Sure, the character models might not look the best when you go up close to them, but walking the streets of Divinity's Reach or the dense jungles of Maguma can lead to some breathtaking moments. The game world does have NPCs on basic routines. Others stand by, occasionally chatting with each other or passers-by. Despite that, the game world feels pretty alive at times too. Partly thanks to other players filling the gaps, of course, but mainly because of great audio and world design.
I'll do my best not to die.
That would be well advised. Goodbye. Probably forever. So sad.
The soundscapes of these places are amazing. The fact that developer ArenaNet has their own Foley studio in-house to make their own sound effects really does show here. Whatever, you know what I mean. And the world is rich, not only in lore, but also everyday stuff. Like 2 commoners on the street gossiping, guards chatting about last week's centaur raid, or letters found in a bandit camp. It all comes together to form a quite believable world. Obviously, also having a prequel set 250 years earlier and years of developers and players building that world, as well as 3 novels, really helps. And a lot of these places existed in the first game, so I've been there before. And sure, they look different and feel different, but they breathe history, culture, and legacy. The game is also very well written. The writing is on point. It's hilarious when it needs to, it's emotional when it needs to, and the many hours of voice acting done by incredible actors make the world feel even more alive.
One remaining Elder Dragon is out there somewhere.
Really, when you think about it, the amount of voice acting in this game is mind-blowing. Alright, but how does it actually play? Because the game is nothing without gameplay. And well, I would say the combat grows on you. Sure, at first it may seem a bit slow and simple. A few skills, an auto attack on skill 1, and half of that 10-slot skill bar on the bottom is probably empty. Eventually it grows. You can start swapping between weapon sets mid-battle, and each of those weapon sets have the first 5 skills change on your skill bar. Utility skills open up, and concepts like defiance bars and break bars that I'm honestly not even sure about myself at this point, still learning, they're thrown into the mix. You need to start dodging incoming attacks, moving around as much as possible while attacking. At some point, it even got a bit overwhelming, and when you join a group of dozens of players for a massive group event, things get chaotic. But eventually it all clicks, and never throughout the whole process was I not having fun. The absolutely massive world, and I mean massive, it's huge. It's full of enemies to battle, puzzles to solve even, stories to discover, and places to explore. So there never really is a dull moment. And more than once I've seen a dynamic event pop up in the vicinity when I'm going from place A to place B, and then suddenly 30 minutes later I've done that event chain and another one, and I'm way off from what I was supposed to be. But I'm just happy about it because I've enjoyed every single second of it. And the fact that a lot of these dynamic events happen to coincide with a lot of these local heart quests that I talked about earlier means they're usually quite fast to finish. A lot of MMORPGs have a quite steep leveling curve, where leveling can become slower and slower the further you get. Not so much here. Guild Wars 2 managed to maintain a generally smooth leveling curve that evens out into a pretty smooth ride towards level 80, which is the max cap, and then after that it doesn't stop. The kind of horizontal leveling system ends up merging into the mastery system, which essentially is leveling up again, but this time instead of getting more levels and some more health, you work on unlocking some cool abilities. Traversal is amazing. Once you buy the expansions and play them just for a little bit, you unlock a glider and the first mount. The expansion and Dragons also has the skiffs and some other cool stuff that I won't get into in this video, because I haven't gotten there yet. And these things are surprisingly good to use. That said, traveling on foot isn't bad at all, it's just mounts and gliders are so well made. Some of the best gliding and riding I've experienced in any game to date. There are even several places where you need to do some minor platforming or even massive jumping puzzles to get to the reward at the end. So even if you want a break from the combat, there's still a lot of fun to be had. As for the endgame, well, I'm not really there yet, but it looks cool. But to get back to the initial question, you're a parent with a limit on how much games you can play and when you can play them. Jumping in for dailies, keeping up with the meta and other MMO stuff, that's not really something you have time for anymore. Luckily, Guild Wars 2 is surprisingly respectful of your time. The horizontal progression as mentioned earlier, well-balanced story missions, and easy to learn but hard to master combat systems means you can jump in as much or as little as you want and whenever you can. The game also starts by updating the files it actually needs first, and then continues to update the rest in the background when you play. So you can usually jump in quite fast without having to wait for downloads. Or you can do what I usually do and play it on something like GeForce Now, which is auto updates for me. Lastly, the game is actually free to play, at least for the full game that as it was released in 2012. The expansions and living story chapters, they cost money, but they're honestly quite cheap. You can easily play for at least 100 hours or more, completely for free. So really, what's your excuse? Just jump in and try it. Seriously, this is a game that deserves way more attention than it gets for all the things it does right. I would say it's a game you shouldn't really miss, and that as a parent, you can enjoy it, because it respects your time, and you can sink a lot of time into it without breaking bank. So really, it's a win-win. Now, as this video is coming to a close, please jump into the comments and tell me what your favorite quests in games. It can be from anything, from an old game, a new game, a pen and paper RPG, open world game, board game, linear story, or even another MMO. And if you want to talk even more in depth about it, or something else entirely, I've actually set up a Discord. So click the link in the description and you can join the fun. And please, do subscribe to the channel and check out some other videos. At this point, there's becoming quite a lot of it. So just pick whatever seems fun. So I try to go live every Wednesday with some gaming. So hit that notification bell and join me in the chat. So if you like this video, which I sincerely hope you did, please hit that like button. Simple as that. And I'll see you around, because I've got a dad quest to get to.
Will you forever take your place in Tyria's history?